Good morning, everyone. Welcome, board members, ACC team, and everyone who's joined us today in the public for yet another virtual meeting. I know we met this way back in June, and being an optimist, I was hoping next time would be all together like we have been almost all the time, but here we are again. Can I ask everyone who's not speaking to mute at the moment, just so we aren't getting any background noise? And I apologize if my dogs add to the background noise while I'm speaking. They're a little nervous today because the smoke detector battery died, and those sounds have triggered panic. So yes, so here we are again, meeting virtually. I think a lot of us are feeling like so much has remained the same as we've been struggling through this pandemic. But I think we'll hear today that there's been a lot of developments, a lot of new challenges, and a lot of success, despite all the incredible hardship and challenge that our team is facing. The thing that's been consistent has been the leadership of ACC. So I wanted to, right at the start, pay tribute to Risa and her team. They have been so committed to keeping the team safe and to getting everything that needs to be done during these times done. And again, all the ACC team that's on the call on behalf of the entire board, we're so appreciative and know how hard this job is in the best of times, and just know that you all are doing an incredible job caring for the homeless and needy animals of New York during one of the most difficult times in the history of the city. And at the same time, too, I think that since we last met, there's been a new and focused commitment on behalf of ACC to diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is vital for the health and mission of our work. So yes, things feel a lot like they did in June, but they're different, and we're being told by the experts that in the coming months things are going to be potentially harder and more difficult before things get better. And I feel like we are in a good place to carry on our mission. And we will, though, as we think and hear and talk about things this morning, we're going to be hearing a lot about the fact that our city is the resources are stretched as we provide resources to fight the pandemic. We have a challenge in our funding, which I know the whole team is working and the board is focused on to close the gap as much as we can. We've seen an increase in adoptions over this pandemic, but also we know that some of the most challenging potential adoptees are still waiting for their new home. And we have been working over these last few years in the communities, trying to bring services to New Yorkers and their pets in order to avoid the sad necessity of surrender. And I feel like we made some great steps. We have some incredible pilot programs, but now during these times, those programs are the vital lifeline to keeping New Yorkers safe with the animals they love. So with all that said, we do have all the sort of normal business that we conduct at an annual meeting, and perhaps the most mundane is the approval of the minutes from the previous meeting, and we're going to start with that. But we're going to hear from our NYPD representative, Jessica Corey, who last time we had some technical difficulties and we weren't able to hear her, and she wanted to make a quick statement before we approve the minutes. Jessica.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. I'm so sorry I wasn't able to speak last time. And I just wanted to support our officers in the NYPD and just remind everybody that not only do they risk their lives every day to protect New Yorkers, but they're also out there protecting animals every day. If you look on all our Twitter feeds, you'll see animals, dogs rescued off of highways. And you just had the recent rescue out of Jamaica Bay. We find animals all the time. I've been told by staff at ACC how often dogs that are brought in or cats that are brought in by officers end up getting adopted by those officers. We do adoptions events, or had been doing them at police precincts all over, and brought ACC in to talk to our staff and our supervisors. And just want to remind everybody that that's done out there. If you look at our Twitter feeds, you'll see all of that. And I really salute our men and women in uniform that are out there doing that every day. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And on that theme of things that haven't changed, that's been something that's, a current. So thank you, and much appreciated. We'll get that into the minutes for this meeting. So may I have a motion to approve the minutes from the June meeting?
Moved.
And a second?
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The minutes are approved. We also, at the annual meeting, appoint our officers and committees. And we've discussed individually and collectively through email that essentially we're going to move forward with the same slate of officers that we've had this past year, which would be me, Patrick Nolan, as chair, Denise Incandela as vice chair, Jay Kuhlman as secretary, and David Glicksman as treasurer.
So as a
May I have the
reminder,
motion? Oh, sorry.
I'm only for the remaining portion of the fiscal year, so my term ends in June. So.
Noted, David, and we'll be eagerly hoping to have you continue to serve if at all possible. So that's noted, and we've it's been great having you on the board and serving as treasurer, and also in the capacity of working on the committee, in particular the audit committee and development committee. So thank you. May I have a motion to approve this slate?
Motion to approve.
And a second?
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And I'll read out the committee positions for the calendar year 2021. The executive committee, Patrick Nolan, chair, Denise Incandela, Yonatan Aronoff, Karen Flight, Elaine Keene, and Corinne Schiff. The governance nominating committee, Denise Incandela, chair, Jay Kuhlman, Corinne Schiff, Neil Abramson, Sarah Okshan. The audit committee, David Glicksman, chair, Yonatan Aronoff, Elaine Keene, and Denise Incandela. And the development committee, Linda Chin, chair, Dennis Gross, co-chair, Patrick, myself, and David, I believe you're on this committee too, correct? Okay, great. And marketing, Denise Incandela, chair, Sarah Okshan, Karen Flight, Corinne Schiff, Jay Kuhlman, Elaine Keene. We did have a contract negotiation committee, but that contract has been completed. But we'll, if needed, it's Yonatan Aronoff, chair, Patrick Nolan, Corinne Schiff, and Neil Abramson. And our Queens Capital Improvement Committee, Yonatan Aronoff, chair, Patrick Nolan, David Glicksman. Okay, so we're now going to move to a comprehensive financial update from our financial team and also from Jennifer DiClemente, our development director. And before we do, because we're going to hear from our new outside financial services firm, Kiwi, but I just wanted to quickly, not quickly, but just take a moment to thank Joe Bellin and everyone at BTQ for the work they've done at ACC. I know Joe is here with us, and I feel the entire time I've been on the board, Joe has been at every meeting and been working with us so closely and so attentively. So I just want to take a moment to thank you, Joe, and wish you all the best on behalf of everyone at ACC and the board. And so I'm going to turn it over now to Jeff Hauser from Kiwi.
Patrick, I just want to let you know there's a terrible echo for me. I don't know if that's for everybody, but just
Okay. Yeah, I'm hearing my voice too, and it's bad enough hearing it one time. I'll mute and hopefully I'll be better when I'm back.
Everyone who's not speaking, just make sure they're on mute.
Right, that's because when you're not muted, someone else who's not muted, you're hearing their speaker on their computer. That's the problem.
Okay, hopefully I was the echo. So by way of introduction, my name is Jeff Hauser, and I thank you for my first ACC board meeting. I work with Kiwi Partners, and Kiwi Partners is a provider of outsourced finance and accounting services, mostly serving the nonprofit entities. I've been working with ACC since the beginning of this fiscal year, or July of 2020, so it's been about 7 months. The agenda that you're looking at will be presented by me for the first few slides and Jennifer DiClemente for the development, which will be at the end of this presentation. Next slide, please. This looks a lot bigger and better on my screen, so I apologize if you can't see some of the numbers here very well, but I will provide you some of the highlights. For the first 6 months of the year, so this is July through December, the organization increased its total net assets by around $868,000. That's that number you see on the bottom, which is a combination of shelter operations, long-term development funds, and of course what's happening with Flushing, the construction. So we budget to the shelter operations, and we had assumed when we did the budget that we'd be able to increase our net assets by around $137,000. That was what was in the budget. We're going to fall a little bit short of that. We are showing about a $51,000 increase from the shelter operations side, which is a difference of about $87,000. Revenue is down about 9%. Actual versus budget, or about $800,000. The significant drivers of that deficiency are shelter income. Shelter and outreach income is down about $234,000, which is about 45%. And our net event revenue is down about $182,000, or about 46%. So the event revenue we can discuss a little bit later on. It's a difficult environment for that kind of activity, so that is not a total surprise. DOH revenue is down. However, the revenue from DOH, the reimbursements from DOH, because that is on an expense reimbursement basis, that the reimbursements generally follow pretty much directionally with the expenses, and we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. The organizational expenses, as you can imagine, have been impacted by the COVID-19 environment.
How many months for the DOH? So I know that's a timing difference with vouchering. Do you know about how many months of vouchering is included in that?
Yeah.
And then also any thoughts about the budget, shelter and outreach variance? Any thoughts about that versus budget?
Yeah. So with DOH reimbursements, it is a combination of actual vouchers that have been submitted and approved, and an accrual or an estimate based on what we know today, what we think is going to be vouchered. So you have a combination of all of that. We close well in advance of when we voucher, And so as a result, this will be this kind of guess throughout the year, and then we'll finally get trued up as we get towards the end of the year. And we're going to discuss a little bit more about that on the next slide. Your second question was providing some color about why shelter and outreach income is lower than budget. Is that what your second question was? I'd ask others, maybe you want to weigh in a little bit about when the budget was put together, about what kinds of things were assumed when that was done.
I have the same question, so would love to hear why it's 45% down.
Well, shelter revenue, a lot of that is from income, either from donations or adoptions. And you'll see when we get to the slides, intake is down significantly. And so are adoptions. So is revenue from shelter operations. Everything has reflects the decrease in intake and the services that we were providing during COVID. When we created the budget, it was a year before COVID even started.
Sense to you, Risa, and you're kind of comfortable with where it landed given the intake decrease?
Yes, yes. I think that we've been doing everything and following national trends and seeing what else we could do. I also feel that the services that we're providing are so essential that we have our eye on serving the community. And you'll hear a lot about surrender prevention in terms of income and the income that we get from services. Again, that's not really, we don't really use shelter income as a revenue driver. It's just services that we provide. And so I expect that will change, but it's not of a big concern right now. I don't think it's for lack of anything that, that our services fell off. I just think it's volume.
And so on the expense side, in response to some of these revenue sources being a little bit lighter than anticipated, and plus we have some significant challenges for cash availability, there have been cost controls organization-wide that have been implemented. One of them, ACC entered into a rent abatement arrangement on its headquarters, and they've done some other things. And so all of that helped to get the expenses about $700,000 or about 7% under what was anticipated.
So I know the supply related stuff. We've spoken about that before. A lot of that is timing of ordering. Budget versus inventory and timing of ordering, which I understand, and I've seen the details behind that. With respect to personnel, though, can you quantify that with respect to headcount, overtime? What's some of the drivers in that, versus people, time, et cetera?
Sorry, I didn't know who's to respond. The question was about how many people have been, how many people are in here that were budgeted that are not in the actual. Is that what the question was?
Yes, unless there's some personnel component that relates to overtime hours or some other capacity within current headcount. But I assume there's a fair amount of headcount, as that's probably the bigger driver. So
yeah, no, there was definite headcount reductions compared to anticipation. There is some overtime which has offset some of that. That overtime was necessary just to be able to meet all service level kinds of agreements. But no, this is just personnel reduction pretty much.
So
how many people?
So I guess I take that a step further. Do we feel like there are a lot of open positions that need to be filled? Do we feel like the current staff levels in all of our entity locations is appropriate at the moment? What or are we looking to try to make changes?
Jeff, I'll take that. When we created the budget, again, it was before COVID, and it was also in anticipation of receiving a one-time enhancement from the Department of Health of $3 million. And then after the fiscal year started, we received news that we would not receive the one-time enhancement. As a result, we let vacancies sit. so that we could get back on track, because as soon as we knew we weren't getting the 3 million, we were in a deficit position. We also had grown the organization. We were about 280 staff. Currently, we're at about 228. That is not good. We are really at a critical low. We have about 40 positions that are posted, and we're actively looking to fill those positions. We are not going to get back to 285. We don't have the funding for that. And we're also looking at what we are doing in COVID. I mean, we're still in COVID, and we will be for a while. And our staff are not vaccinated, nor are they in any category to get vaccinated. So we still really need to be careful about how many people we can bring into the care centers, and also the services that we're providing. The other part about personal funding is that we have a lot of people who, for a year now, a lot of people who go on leave. We have lots of benefits. We avail ourselves of all of the federal and the state opportunities, but then there are staff who are on our roster who are on unpaid leave for a variety of reasons. So you will see, I think in the next fiscal year, as we do our budget, you will see a decline. We will not be back at 285 staff.
Thanks, that was very clarifying.
So, is everyone who was working in the headquarters, are they all working from home now?
Yeah, most people who were at HQ are working from home. We do have operations that are happening at HQ. I mean, we still have development that goes in, not 5 days a week, but from various days during the week. We have admin support services. Our finance team is going in there. IT is going in. There are some administrative functions that are really difficult. If you can't do them from home, you have to go into the office. We space it out. You have to fill out a questionnaire. We do not want full head count in HQ. It is not a space that can fit 30 people. Same thing for the directors who would float from shelter to shelter. Again, we can't take up space at the shelters for people who work there full time. So we may float through for a few hours or spend half a day, but really acknowledging that we're taking up the space of somebody else who needs to safely work there. So to the extent you can do your job from home, that is encouraged, but the office space is still being fully utilized because there is technology there and there are administrative services. And certainly with development, people still send checks, and we get a lot of donations sent to HQ. And inquiries, people who come there. So we still serve the community and the organization through HQ.
Got it. So that you were anticipating my question, Risa, which was, I'm surprised technology has to physically be there, because that's usually the group that is easiest to work from home. But my question was, is there a scenario in the future where we don't need the HQ and can save that rent?
Absolutely. We, in fact, our general counsel, Jen Peavy.
But the lease is expiring next August, so.
No, the lease immediately, and Jen, if you want to step in, you can, but immediately Jen went to work on negotiating, getting us out of that lease. And as you might understand, landlords were not that forgiving. They weren't happy to package us up and say, off you go. So Jen did a phenomenal job negotiating a significant reduction in our lease, but it required an extension of a year. But even with that extension, we are still saving money. But to your point, Denise, the goal absolutely is to reduce headquarters to a bare minimum, get technology out of there. The Bronx shelter actually, when it comes back on board, that construction's on pause. When that's back on board, the plan for the Bronx Care Center was to include administrative offices so that we would not be at HQ for much longer. And it was sort of timed for the end of that lease. However, until we know when the Bronx is back online, we will have to figure out how to reduce. And everybody who works at HQ has already had the conversation with admin about how do you scale down? What don't you need? Start thinking that you will not have an office in 2 years. So we're really starting to reduce not only our rent, but in our minds, we're starting to think about what that looks like for an HQ, even if the Bronx isn't open when our lease expires.
Got it. Thank you. And what is the annual rent for HQ?
Jen, I don't have that number offhand.
Yeah. So what I negotiated was 3 months for free and a 30% reduction for 17 months in exchange for signing an additional 12 months. I don't know offhand what that third year is going to cost, but
I'm just curious
I'm looking at
when we end up eliminating HQ, just curious what we'll save.
I just found it. It's 315,000 for that third year.
third year.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to point out, obviously having an office space does cost additional money, and our mission is all about animals. However, for anybody who's been to any care center, doesn't matter which one, you can see there is no office space there. There's absolutely no place to do any work. What COVID did was entertain the idea where working from home is acceptable. And so if you don't have an office, you can work from home. And so, traditionally that was not really looked upon as an option. And now we see that unless we're having group meetings, we can rent small space for that. So it's really a whole change in how people work. And, we're following the business trends on that too. So I just want to point out, while it's expensive space, it's not as expensive. It's a Class B building. Really, Jen did a lot of work negotiating with this landlord. And again, even before COVID, there is no space for, we had 280, now 225 is a lot of people to support, and we're growing. So the Queens, you'll hear about the Queens shelter, that's coming up very soon. That's going to add about 80 people to our staff. So we will need admin support. We absolutely do. You have payroll, taxes, admin, finance, IT, so HR, but we'll figure out a strategy that's definitely going to save on rent.
Last quick question on this page. Just unrestricted, the $1.2 million. Is any of that 1906? Is there a share of that unrestricted that's targeted for 1906?
No, that $1.2 million is ASP a little while.
That good. Understood.
Sure. Next slide, please. All this slide does is takes the last one and slices it differently. So the last slide talked about lines on a profit and loss statement. This takes the net assets change and breaks it up into sources. So you can see the change in net assets that comes from DOH activity as the first section, the change from non-DOH activity, and then out of construction activity, totaling up to the same 867 that we saw before. So in response to David's question from earlier, again, I'll remind you, we complete our monthly accounting close in advance of when we voucher. So there is some amount of guesswork on the revenue side that gets trued up over time. In addition, there are certain kinds of expenses we record for GAAP accounting purposes that we do not charge DOH for, but in order to close the books, we got to do that. Depreciation is one of those. We are also incurring things like interest expense on the line of credit, which we can't claim reimbursement for, so that will always be somewhat negative. The hope here is that over time, we will bridge this the deficit a little bit. We continue to make sure that we have all expenses that are reimbursable coded correctly. And part of our process during the course of the year might involve having to request budget modifications, and that may be coming in certain areas. And so we have to do that in order. So we have to request a budget mod, then we have to get it approved, and then we voucher. So there will be a little bit of lag in time, but we are working to reduce that deficit somewhat. On the non
to your quick point, real quick, any budget mod has to be approved by the DOH. That's correct?
Yes,
Okay.
before, yes.
Correct.
That is correct. That is correct. The non-DOH, the middle section, if we had done this table back in November, it was going to look really ugly. But in the month of December, we received temp restricted contributions of about $1.2 million from ASPCA. And again, Jennifer will give you more of those details in a little while. However, I will just mention to you that something like 800,000 of those contributions are actually restricted to use all the way to fiscal 22. So that isn't all necessarily, cash that is available now, but note that that we have it. And then the construction activity is on the bottom. The OTPS expenses normally would be negative. We did receive a property tax refund of about 28,000, so that's why that looks like it's positive, even though it's expenses. But anyway, this is just the same table you saw before, but sliced differently. Next slide, please. The following
Assets
is
and
the,
liabilities. So Risa, what's your overall take on the P&L this year, given COVID? Like, what's your point of view and how things landed?
In all honesty, I feel in some sense that we're a bit of status quo, in that the knowledge that we didn't receive the one-time enhancement after we had already created a budget was a huge setback for us. And I'm very, very aware of the financial situation in New York City and nationally. And so I'm not complaining about that. But we didn't have 3 million. We also had fewer animals coming in, which helped the situation. We also had staff who were leaving because we couldn't replace, because we didn't have the money that supported that level of staffing. So there was a confluence of events taking place while they were terrifying and required a lot of difficult conversations and decisions. I feel like we have started to come through this where our heads are just above water. In the very beginning, it was a lot of concern that everything was going to fall apart. And when we get to my slides, you'll see that there were just a lot of things happening that sort of helped us continue to serve the community and keep the animals that are in our care healthy, enriched, attended to, while we try to keep the staff safe. So, it's something that we're all going to have to struggle with. And especially the city's financial situation is not great. And we are waiting with bated breath to see what our funding will be for the subsequent years. So all things considered, I feel like we're in a place that's not to be celebrated, but I don't feel like we're drowning. I feel like we have a lot of hard work to do. Fundraising is very difficult. There's been, and Jen will cover that we've really did a shift because events are just really not the money makers that we always relied on.
any other questions on the expenses or the P&L before I get to the balance sheet? So the next two slides, this one and the next one, present the preliminary and obviously unaudited balance sheet. These are based on where we believe the June 2020 balance sheet is going to end up. We have not completed the audit yet. There is a question about the accounts receivable that is on the books at June 30 because of what we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. This assumes, however, there will be no changes to what we expect the June 30 balance sheet to be. So now we roll it forward. So you are looking at the balance sheet as of December 31, segregated.
And clearly, if that had taken place already, we would have had a netting of the AR and the DOH advance, so they wouldn't look so astronomical because the two of them
Yes.
in combination, it should really be taken in combination, which is obvious.
That also, and even the net, when you take the AR minus DOH of that, what's about 3.575, again, 2.7 of that is from fiscal 20 and is the question, the funding question. So the dollars wouldn't be as large, but yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. The other thing to note on here is you will notice that there is a line of credit balance, which you will see in the liabilities, and that was we had repaid the line of credit balance that was at the end of fiscal 20. However, we had to draw upon it again in order to fund the funding shortfall, if you will, from fiscal 20.
Of repayment on when that's supposed to start getting.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part of that.
Sorry, I'm wondering what the timing of repayment is. Is there a payment due soon, February, March?
We have not been provided a specific indication of when we can expect fiscal 20, which is one of the reasons why we can't get the audit from fiscal 20 signed off and finalized yet.
No, I understood that. I meant with the line of credit, or what's the is that just fine? Can we hold that as long as we need it?
We will keep that likely outstanding until we fund fiscal 20 because we don't have another source of funding at the moment. We have made preliminary inquiries. Yeah.
I understand. No, my apologies. I understand. It's all pending the June vouchers. So
correct.
We're really just deferring the timing of receiving that. So I totally get it. Okay.
Yeah, no, that is correct. We have made a preliminary inquiry about whether or not we could be eligible for a FCNY loan fund for the city of New York. Perhaps to tide us over on the 2.7 million, but it's preliminary. We're not really sure where that'll go, but we have asked. So again, all I'll note here, we did have positive cash flow in the first half of fiscal 21, but again, the 2.7 million that is still out there is it's a drag, certainly on the organization. I mentioned the line of credit balance. We did receive an advance on fiscal 21. That's why you'll see the DOH advances being what they were. We get 25% of our annual budget up front. So I believe that was 3.7 million, I believe was the number that we had received. I'll remind you, however, that starts to get recouped. It was scheduled to start being recouped with the February vouchering. We are in discussions to see if we can somehow push that off to the March or April. However, that doesn't resolve the problem with fiscal 20, which we are going to have to get to the bottom of at some point. Any questions on the cash flow statement? Okay, thank you. So for the next slide, I'm going to have Jennifer lead us the presentation. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Everyone. So as Jeff mentioned, there's definitely been difficulties and challenges over the past months with the pandemic, but we really wanted to share some highlights from the last month. We worked really hard to find new funders and sources of revenue to make up some of the losses we've seen, like events that have been mentioned. So we really focused a lot on individual giving. December was an especially strong month, with Giving Tuesday being our most successful that we've had. And we brought in a little over $60,000, which was very exciting. With this and other great donations we had the end of year giving, we are seeing a 30% increase in online giving compared to last year. We also have focused a lot on sending out a lot of proposals for foundations, 2 foundations for grants, and we received 185,000 in grants from new foundational funders. These include the Milstein Foundation, GS Humane Corps, William Dean Trust, and Emma Barnsley Foundation. And also, as Jeff mentioned, the ASPCA continues to be a top supporter of our vital programs in that area. And then, yes, event revenue didn't come in. It came in about half of what we normally would raise in a regular in-person event. But from the companies we worked with and the other development colleagues of mine around other organizations that I've spoken with, I think that actually was a really strong return on our first ever virtual gala. So we did well, and I think everyone who supported that event and joined. So then this, you can see just breakdown of the different categories and where we are. Next slide.
How does this compare to last year? Sorry. So the
Oh, it's okay.
2.4 compares, what was it, LY, and what's the percent delta?
So right around this time, so last year it was 2.8. We did have a little bit more, well, some of that's made up in the 200 from the gala. And there was a little bit more in grants that came in December, but we do expect some of them to come in over the next months.
So what's your forecast for how this will compare to last year?
For the end of fiscal 21?
Yeah.
So last year, for the end of fiscal, I think we're going to be around 3.2 by the end of fiscal 21. We were around 3.6. So I think most of the revenue is really going to be seen. I feel like we were really strong in making new funders and making up, but we will definitely take a little bit of a hit with the pandemic in general. So I think we will be a little bit under when we finish this fiscal year.
Okay, thanks.
Next slide. But sort of talking on that point and where we're trying to go over the next month, Spring Fling obviously will not be able to be in person. And so we've talked a lot about how like that virtual event platform, a lot of people are like sick of joining. And so we're trying to come up with a new way to make it exciting and do something different. So our plan is to do a month-long campaign for the month of May. That'll be like our Spring Fling fund drive. We're going to have a goal of raising $100,000 for that. So we'll be pushing that out all for the month of May and having hopefully some exciting content and getting people to want to support that. And we will continue to focus on online donations and individual giving. So we're planning a membership drive for our New York Kindness monthly donors who are such important sustainers. So we're going to do an appeal specifically to gain more of them. Matching donation periods have been really successful. So we're going definitely do that we have something in the works for what we'll do during Spring Fling, and if we can do another one as well, which will be great. Focused on sending out, like I said, increasing the grant proposals that we submit and keep prospecting new funders. And then we'll continue to work with corporate partners and encouraging matching gifts, which we've seen. We've used a new software called Double Your Donation that's been on our website and in our thank you letters, so people can very easily find if their company what their company match is. So that we'll keep marketing that and partnering in that way with corporations.
Jen, do you want to speak a bit on the widening efforts to find even a wider base of foundations in terms of the grant proposals that you're doing?
Sure. So we prospect a lot with Foundation Center, using that tool to really look at funders that give to animal welfare. But then we also have looked at a lot of community-based grant funders. And so, as Risa mentioned, surrender prevention, community pets, those have been, are huge programs that we've focused a lot on over the pandemic. And so while we applied to like Robin Hood Foundation and we didn't quite get turned down, but we'll be reapplying soon for them. New York Community Trust is one who's funded us in the past, but there's other foundations like them, like Brooklyn Community Foundation. So trying to really focus on where ACC is going as a community resource. And so we think that there's potentially new funding opportunities outside of traditional foundations that focus on specifically to animal welfare. So we're working to really prospect those.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that's it for me. I don't know who's up next or.
I am.
Thanks. Thanks. Yeah. I'm going to pass it over to Reese in a second, but I just wanted to thank you and the development team and all the board who've been working so hard on the development. Denise, the matching grant you offered for Giving Tuesday was incredible. Almost every single board member, I think all the board was at our virtual gala, and again, it was a challenging thing, but we turned it around and raised quite a bit of money, and it really was an experience, and it was a great way to bring a wider group of people who maybe not always can afford a table or a ticket to come in and see what we're about and to support us and make donations. So it was great to watch that live crawl. And again, Dennis and Linda did an amazing job as co-chairs of bringing in some incredible sponsorship. And so it wasn't easy, and it's not going to be easy. And I think we're all doubling down and trying to be as creative as we can as we move forward to find ever increasing ways to build our support and to get more donations. So again, the people who are out listening to us as well, if you can, we would appreciate your support as well. Now I'm going to turn it over to Teresa, who's going to give us an update on the centers.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. So just if we could go back to that first slide on the cover there. Yep. So I'm just going to do a little plug for Ocean, who is a 5-year-old thoroughbred. She is already spayed, so she is available for adoption. If anybody is interested in her, you can download our app for more information. You can go to our website, and her ID number is 79318. We have many, many thoroughbreds like her available. So let's jump right in. Next slide, please. This is a montage of staff. Clearly not everybody is in here, and we have hundreds and hundreds of pictures of our staff. But I really just wanted to start off with a real appreciation and shout out to the hundreds of staff that we have who come in every day. They show up. We never closed our care centers during the pandemic. Our staff were as terrified as everybody else. And it was, I think, a shared experience for all of us, but in particular for people who had to get up and commute and get to their jobs. It was a very incredible time. But what you can see is a lot of social distancing and masks, and yet the compassion shines through. The staff are really incredible. They're there to do what they can. I'm going to talk a lot about individual programs that we ran. I really want you to see the composite of what's going on at the care centers. The priority for us, like everybody else who had essential workers, was the health of the staff. The health and safety of our staff are number one. This is an organization that cannot just run by itself. We have animals that require 24/7 attention, and we needed to prioritize the health and safety of our staff. It's not perfect, but it is a priority, and we struggle. We are seeing vacancies. People are leaving because it's stressful and it's hard. And I think, like in many industries, I think it's wearing thin. And I really just applaud the staff. We try, HR, the leadership team, the managers really are trying to think out of the box to come up with ways that make the staff feel protected, safe, and appreciated. But it's a challenge every day. And we're just so grateful. I mean, you'll see the work that we have been able to accomplish during COVID, and it is because of the people that you see here on these slides and many, many other slides that I have shared in the past. So let's turn to the next slide and get into the details. You know, we're still in COVID. We are following national trends, participating in conversations. This is all about animal sheltering during COVID. At the last board meeting, we were sort of thinking about, you know, come January, it will be post-COVID, what did we learn? But we're still learning. There's so much changing in the animal welfare environment, including problems that we anticipate will come down the road with tenant evictions. But there is a tremendous wealth of information at the national level. And you can see in the box on the right, the data that is collected nationally, and ACC is no exception. We are following really the trends across the nation with a decline in intake, adoptions relative to intake are down, and same thing with work with rescue partners. And so at least we know we're not an outlier, and what results from that is that the industry collaboration is just incredible. It is really all about a collective approach to problem solving. It is not about who's number one and who's doing this better than that. It's like, we tried this, and here's a spreadsheet of how we did it, and here's my phone number. And so there's a lot of networking and a lot of really good information to be learned. And there are national calls every week on different topics and for different audiences that all of us from the leadership level to the managers are participating in. And of course, the national funders and national organizations have been outstanding in their response to COVID grants and providing funding for really people safety in addition to animal needs. And we'll get to that in a little bit. Next slide, please. Okay, so we had this up in June. It's no different than now in January. What is different is that it's just so much more of the types of protocols that we have put in place. In particular, we created our own COVID task force that is transparent and follows science and data and best practices, and apply it to ACC and our working environment to come up with solutions that that can work for us. Again, like I said before, not everything is ideal. We do have to limit the occupancy in the care centers, so we've created outdoor space for clients who have made appointments, or sometimes people show up to surrender without an appointment. We cannot just have people coming in. We want to help everybody, but we really have to manage social distancing and the health and safety, not only of our animals, but our staff and our clients as well. The task force is made up of Dr. Brennan and Jen Peavy, who's our general counsel, and Michael Costa, who's our senior manager of human resources. So we have the three really important components of putting together protocols, communicating new surveys, rules, texts. We're just putting out as much information as possible, because we know more information and transparency is really the best way to make sure that we're keeping everybody safe. These are, again, things that you've seen before, but we are just doing more and more of it. And we are using COVID grants to buy supplies like tents and furniture for staff to sit outside to have their lunch. Our break rooms are very small. We have a lot of staff who need to take a break, and we can't put everybody in the break room. We've ordered heaters. And again, it's like one step forward, two steps back, the wind comes, the tents fall apart. So we really have to refocus and figure out constantly what we could do to keep everyone safe. And one big thing is that we installed plexiglass and you'll see in some of the slides in many areas, especially the ones that have contact with the public. And then the other point to make is really the layout of the care centers. The buildings, the hallways are narrow, the rooms where the animals are small, and it makes it very difficult for social distancing. So we're really, so much of our work is just informed by safety for individuals. Next slide, please. So data, intake. Similar to the national average, ACC is down 39%. You can see the difference from 2019 to 2020. And we also laid out in a bar chart on the bottom, the month to month. And you could see, even though we were in COVID, just the pattern of intake follows really what we see on an average year, not number, but just pattern. So April through October, still it's kitten season. April clearly had a much lower intake number because that was that was a time of lockdown and when most people were really, really concerned about coming outside. The biggest decrease that we saw in intake was kittens. And, you know, there's a lot of factors that we believe contribute to that. In particular, people didn't want to come outside. So we usually get kittens or stray, and so we would get a litter. And also a lot of rescue groups. And I really have to give a shout out to them, and in particular to the Brooklyn Bridge Animal Welfare Coalition. They took kittens directly. And so these rescue groups really helped the shelters avert what could have been a really difficult kitten season for us. And so I just think that, you know, part of the thing we talk about throughout COVID is collaboration. It was really, in particular with kitten season, collaboration was just enormous.
You know, just to add to that, you know, there was a concern because a lot of mobile spay neuter operations were down and a lot of rescue groups weren't able to spay neuter a lot of the stray population. So I think there was a feeling that could turn out into the reverse and cause lots of other kittens. But I totally agree. You know, team collaboration, people stepping up, and it's really been amazing what people can do when necessary.
Risa?
Yes.
Can we, I know it's hard to do, but do you have any sense of whether the freeze and evictions impacted intake rate and by how much?
You know, I think the question really that we're trying to address is what will happen when evictions happen. And so, and I guess that a little bit, that's sort of like we're fortunate that we have this pause right now, but there's a very, very big concern about what that looks like. And I'll get to that a little bit. But I think because there were no evictions, I do think that the intake number, I think it, of course, would have been much bigger. And it would have been
I wonder if there's even, you know, evictions we understand, but, you know, from my understanding also adoptions are up because people are working from home. So they're saying, you know, why not get a pet? And I think there's still an unknown of if a day comes when everybody has to return to the office, they say, oh no, now I can't keep my dog or my cat or whatever. you know, I'm sure they'll all love them to death by then, so it won't matter, but you never know.
Right, and that's a good point, and something that we're also creating strategy for, because early on in COVID, we thought that might be the case, but I think, you know, we're in this a year, almost in just a few weeks, it will be a year. So, but our adoption team and post-adoption follow-up has been really good. So I'll get to that in a few slides. I do want to point out something, notwithstanding the decrease in intake, the number, if you see in the bullets, owner surrender through field was up dramatically. When people were really afraid to leave their homes, our field team did over 2,000 direct pickups at people's homes. They went to homes where people were either afflicted with COVID, they were homebound, there were people who were hospitalized who had animals in their homes. So our field team really really stepped up. We felt that was absolutely necessary to serve the community. It's not necessarily something that is part of the field team's daily duty. Like, we do encourage people to, if you don't have a car, we encourage you to find solutions if you need to come to the shelter with your pet. But during COVID in particular, the field team stepped up.
And in addition to that, I know that, we really stepped up with pantry deliveries of people who used to come to the pantries that were closed, now delivering the food directly to them so they didn't have to surrender their pet and they could still take advantage of some of those resources, surrender prevention resources. I know that was big.
Right. And as we turn to the next slide in surrender prevention, we will we'll get to that. And like you said, David, people had needs, a lot of needs during COVID. And so surrender prevention in particular really, really was called upon. And what started for ACC as a pilot with the ASPCA over the years developed more and more. And by the time we entered the situation we were in COVID, it was a fully formed department. So we were very lucky. We were ahead of the curve in terms of being able to react to the needs of the community. But of course, nationally, that is the focus. What's going on in the community? How can we help the community? What you can see as part of the program that we had been doing for several years already is proactive outreach to our client base. So we had an active roster of current clients who needed help. And so our team reached out to the ones who were already clients. Food insecurity also became a huge issue. The admissions team, in order to serve the community, we really need to know what your needs are. And in order to measure surrender prevention, we sort of have to have a baseline. So the surrender prevention team, the conversation starts with a questionnaire. And based on that, we're able to provide needs. And sometimes they make an appointment and then they either cancel it or they never come back because they don't need to surrender. And so that's how we measure the over 3,600 pets that we were able to keep with their families. We also went to a very robust scheduling process for surrenders. If you absolutely can't keep your pet, we just need to manage. We need to manage what's coming in. We need to manage how we can serve the person. And we also need to manage the number of people that are inside the care center. So that created actually really added to efficiency, certainly helped on the safety side, but it really helped us manage the program and our resources. With respect to the community effort, again, this is just another example of collective problem solving. I spoke in June about the Animal Planning Task Force, which originally came out of the Office of Emergency Management in this city. And it's a collective of really all the animal players in the city and nationally, but the ASPCA, HSUS, Best Friends, Bide-A-Week, the New York State Animal Federation, Animal Havens on it. And it was a group that came together to really try and mitigate problems. In particular, what had happened is if the task force, through a whole triage of different options for pet surrender or COVID-related problems, if it couldn't be managed through the task force, there was a resource line, and that was really for this very difficult cases, and that came to ACC. But I really want to recognize two individuals who, with the resource line, really helped the work that ACC was left with, and that is Christine Kim from the mayor's office and Jenny Coffey. As you know, these are social work issues. They weren't necessarily an animal specific issue. These were difficult social work issues where we needed help getting someone's apartment keys while someone was in the hospital. We didn't have the right address, but we knew that somewhere in this neighborhood on this block, there's a home with 5 cats in it. So collecting all that information, working with both Christine and Jenny really just helped us do our job. And again, it's really just collective problem solving. And so we are so grateful for what exists in New York City, which leads me to the next point, that we are ready in terms of activating the Animal Planning Task Force hotline again. The resource line is still available. We have the processes, but more importantly, we have the partnerships in place so that when, in particular, tenant eviction becomes the issue, we're ready to go. If, I do hope it's not the situation, but if the situation with COVID gets even worse and more people have animal needs, we know how to activate. With respect to tenant eviction, there's not much to report right now because of the pause, but there is work starting to happen on that, and we'll have more to report in the coming months. Okay, next slide, please. On the placement side, if you look at the graph, the pie charts, we just wanted to do a comparison to 2019, but it's really like an apples to oranges because we're not comparing the same situation in terms of, certainly in terms of intake and how we get animals adopted. What you can see is adoptions really are down by 4,000, but so the intake was down as well. New Hope still did a good job. We're really grateful for our New Hope partners. We added 40 new partners. The issue that was the biggest challenge for the New Hope partners, like you said, David, was spay neuter. There is a backlog of spay neuter, and so a lot of partners like to pull after surgery, so that was an issue. But we didn't see a steep decline, as you can see. Just doing the percentages, New Hope was 49% of placement last. Last year was 49%, and this year was 53%. And for adoptions, 43% of the placements were adopted directly to the public, and this year was 38%. It's a decent job. I mean, I know that what we were trying to push for many, many years is to get the adoptions directly to the public to exceed the rescue placements. And we see a little bit of a change there. And again, I am so grateful to the rescue community because they really helped. There were a lot of staffing issues and issues about coming to the shelters to adopt. So they really, really pulled through for us. We did.
Sorry
yes.
to interrupt. Just
yeah.
What you're saying is very helpful, and looking at these comparisons between 2019 and 2020 of the actual numbers, paints a certain picture. But when you mentioned our intake is down, I'm just that whole picture of animals that are getting adopted through going to New Hope, getting adopted or returned to owner. What's that overall percentage? Because we have read in the media, and we all have this sense that adoptions are up, but these numbers make us think that numbers are down, partly because our intake is down. But what is that overall picture for ACC's animals? Are we seeing that there is an overall increase in this period during this pandemic, or are we not sort of following that trend that sort of, at least through anecdotal reports in the media, are making us think that adoptions are up?
I'm going to let Ellen speak to that, since this is really her baby.
Hi. So I do believe that nationally adoptions are definitely up, but I think for all of us, I mean, for me on my Facebook, when I see a lot of people who have adopted, they aren't the animals that we necessarily are getting at ACC. So we still don't get puppies. Kittens that have always been a very easy adoption for us most of the years were our most significant decline. So I think the combination of that we have less animals, but we still mostly have animals that are more challenging to find homes for. is the best way that I could describe that. And then if I could just quickly mention something from the surrender prevention side, I do really want to emphasize like how major it was that we were able to increase so significantly the number of people we were able to help and have their pets not come in. And actually, the number there, those are the number of preventions. So that represents even more animals than the, I don't have the number right in front of me, the 3,800 or so. So some of those could have been a home that had 3 cats that we helped. And when Risa mentioned that our staff was going above and beyond, like you have to picture staff after hours standing outside a hospital waiting for a social worker to come out with a key to an apartment and then going to that apartment to secure the animals because that person is in the hospital with COVID and has no other resources. And that was something that happened multiple times. So I just thought that was important to share. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. No, I think, you know, I asked the question because I know that it's, you know, sometimes you see these reports in the media and you think everything's going great. And I think Risa and you and everyone are doing an incredible job. And also it's so complex that we're hearing. Each individual case is so complex. And there hasn't been an easy thing, an easy fix here. And I think there's a perception in the public that all the animals have been adopted. And that's just not the case. And often, you know, we're taking care of the ones that are the most challenging to find homes.
Yeah, I think what we have found is more of our adoptions, that number represents a lot more animals that have challenging behaviors or are older. We've also, for some strange reason, had the fattest cats I've ever seen in my life. To the point where when I walk around the shelter, most of our cats are obese and I don't know where they're all coming from. But just to say, like, even with that, we are still doing adoptions. And I think we found more homes for animals that probably wouldn't have been adopted in other times. So that's really felt like a win for a lot of us too.
That's where I was going, Ellen. Was our placement rate higher? But it's just, well, just overall intake was lower, but the
just to comment on the pie metrics real quick. So you're looking at, you know, where New Hope was about 49% of the 20,000 versus adoptions of 43% of the 20,000 versus in 2020, you're close to 12,000 and you got New Hope at about 53 and adoptions at 38. So, you know, the biggest driver, obviously, in the numbers is intake being down. The percentages are staying within a standard deviation, you know, within themselves.
Yeah, in New Hope, I mean, our New Hope partners have had the same challenges, if not more than we have. I mean, we, you know, as much as, you know, we will say we are dealing with these buildings that weren't built to be shelters, et cetera, but at least we have the buildings. I mean, for some of our New Hope partners, you know, their networks have maybe, you know, collapsed. We've had a couple of partners who took a lot from us in the past and worked with us really closely that have had, you know, really COVID-related life-altering experiences that are no longer in the rescue business. So we've maintained that number, I think, really well for how challenging some of our partners have had it also.
Many of them rely on foster networks. They don't all have physical locations. So you know,
exactly,
that presents a number of challenges with foster
exactly
networks.
And they have the same funding challenges that we've had, even more so because they depend more on individual contributions with the public that's, you know, financially challenged right now themselves.
So what happened to our placement rate year over year? Was there our placement rate?
Our placement rate is up.
That's what I would have expected. We're going to get to a slide on that.
Yes, at the end, there's a slide of all of our community data points, but the placement rate for dogs is 94% for the end of the year. So it is up.
What was it compared to last year? I'm wondering the year over year changes for dogs and cats for placement rate.
Hang on.
the
let's-
macro thing shifts that are going on.
I think, Katie, if you are on and know that number, I'm looking it up.
We're 92% this year. So we did go down in our placement rate with cats, but again, we went up in our placement rate with dogs to
So
90%.
can you tell me, Katie, what the placement rate was this year versus last year for cats and dogs?
I have it, Katie.
Okay.
Our year-end review from last year, dogs was 93% and cats was 92.7.
So I'm trying to compare last year to this year.
So I have to jump to the slide, but dogs, I think it's 94%, and I believe cats is at, what is it, Katie, 94 and 92?
No, I think it's 90.7, but Philip has that.
Okay, we can wait till we get to that page. I just want
Yeah,
to
there's
see,
a,
we just want to see the year over year for each one.
I have a question about the fostering.
oh, that's the next slide.
Oh, okay, then I'll hold my question.
And actually, Ellen, while you're still on, because you talked a little bit about Fosters for New Hope, do you want to add, we had been also assisting with finding Fosters for New Hope partners in addition to our own, but the next slide is all about the foster program, which really made a difference on our shelter placement. Okay, I'll take it. All right, so if you look at the next slide, we're on foster. We really, that, and truly nationally and also at ACC, that really is the future in placement. Everybody wanted animals. Some wanted them temporarily because they didn't know how long COVID would last. What you find, animals that are in foster, you get such a better idea of who they are and what they, what they like, and they're out at the shelter. And so that made placement better. It also made the adoption stronger because the people who were adopting from fosters had so much more information that made for a better adoption fit. In the beginning, some of the challenges were trying to get the animals into foster homes. How do you physically get them? And we certainly had a team working on that, actually bringing animals to people. Things have gotten a little bit better. And it really is just in particular for shy cats. Foster really worked. As you can see, we put so many cats into foster. And to your point, David, we are optimistic that people who have been fostering for us might keep fostering. Maybe they'll adopt them, but even after the pandemic, maybe they will stay committed to fostering, seeing what it's like to have a pet. And that you don't have to be, you can have a life and have a pet as well. And maybe more people will be working from home in the future. So we're optimistic about the foster program, and we will continue to push it. One of the things that we added to meet the demand was telemedicine for our fosters and a dedicated veterinary staff for fosters, and that really seemed to help with those placements.
So
And you can see the data and the results. It was quite successful.
For the fosters at one
I don't know if that answered your question.
No, my question, well, yes and no. The second part of my question was in the beginning.
I think you might be muted, or I can't hear you.
No, I'm not muted. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Everybody else is nodding. Can you hear me?
It's low, but I can hear you. Yes, just, yeah.
Hold on. Can you hear me now? Well, I'll just speak really loud. Can you hear me, Risa?
Oh, I can't hear anything. Maybe it's on my end. Now I can hear you.
Okay. I just want, in the beginning, the fosters, it was the messaging seemed to be, you couldn't get a foster. I mean, there just weren't that many available if people wanted them. And I'm wondering if now all the animals that are there are such that they can't be fostered, or if there are plenty animals available, and are we still looking for the messaging that we want more fosters and more animals to go into foster?
I would say we always want more fosters because you never know how a new foster can help our population. We may have an animal that needs foster, and even if we have 20 available fosters, that animal doesn't fit with their lifestyle per se. So we're always looking. And I mean, I would say, I'll put the plug out there. Anyone who can foster a large dog that has some challenging behavior, you can call me any time of the day or night, and we will talk to you about that. So cats, as Lisa said, have benefited tremendously from this, and that's something that we have learned and will take forward forever, that shy cats, cats that just aren't as social, do so much better in a home and show themselves so much better for adopters. But as we've talked about, in the past so frequently, the large dogs will always be our biggest challenge and need.
Okay. Moving on to the next slide, please. Okay, volunteers. So the last time we met, I had reported that we had to close our doors to volunteers, which was very difficult. Certainly for the volunteers, they are so committed. They have huge hearts. And for the staff too, because it's an essential part of really helping us do our work. We're very happy to report that in-shelter volunteering is back on. And we have what we call operational forces, where we manage the flow of volunteers just to ensure social distancing. A big shout out to Best Friends, who actually, their center in Soho hasn't reopened. And so they have been sending us their staff to help us out for the full day as volunteers. And even though the number of volunteer hours are down from 2019, it's still a significant number of hours, given all the challenges. We're really just so grateful. And some of our volunteers have even taken on new roles just to help what the best need is at the care center. So we have a longtime volunteer, Evelyn, who has always taken such beautiful photos of our dogs, and now she's doing photos of cats and writing bios. Kevin, who you can see in the bottom right with Christine, he does the NBC show in the morning on Saturdays. There they are in our linen closet, folding hundreds of towel donations. And of course, there's walking dogs. There's just, we're really thankful and we're grateful. And even though it's not as robust as it was, it is still an essential part of how we are able to get our work done. And then on the kids side, we are utilizing virtual. Really, the benefit here for the organization is that it allows us to do more educational outreach. I mean, the whole point of the Community Kids program was an understanding that this is the next generation of pet owners or animal professionals. And so we really took the opportunity to stay connected with the schools. And as you can see, students have taken virtual tours. We've made presentations. And then the bottom left is just, it was an art project for students, and they drew pictures of various animals that we had for adoption. And we used that with the bio and the information about various animals. So there was a lot of good engagement on that end. And next slide, please. And again, going back into the community, this is really sort of an outgrowth of surrender prevention too. Like, these two programs really have to work in concert. There is so much need, and with the financial situation as it is, and as it may become worse, with evictions coming up, we know that the community needs us. And so the partnership with human food pantries has been a really important piece that we added. We continue to serve clients that have already been part of our food pantry. And food is not necessarily a surrender prevention. It's really just, it's a resource that people need. And it's an easy fix so that it doesn't get so out of hand that perhaps they have to surrender. So a lot of organizations also are really interested in food. And so we're planning food pop-ups with some city council members. We had delivered food to in Queens to a community housing complex. So we know where the need is, and we know it's just going to get greater. And you can see down below, we already gave out over 100,000 pounds of food. And then wellness clinics, that was really an important part of community pets and community outreach. They're not easy to do, and social distance. We are fortunate because we were able to get several clinics in. We started again in the fall. I think we did one in August, September, 2 in October, 1 in November, but it's hard. And it's the health, again, the health of our staff is paramount. We will get back to it, but we're proud of the work that we were able to accomplish. And again, it just helps inform what we need to do if this is the way we're going to be working. If this is the environment we're going to work in for the next year or through the fall, then we need to figure out how we can provide services that are clearly needed in the community.
Hey, Risa, earlier in the meeting, you said that our staff have not been vaccinated and are not considered essential workers. Can you talk a little bit more about that and at what point we do expect them to get vaccinated? Because I was surprised to hear that, given that I'm hearing designers in the fashion world are considered essential workers. So
well, if the first thing I would say is that they found the category of essential workers in that at the beginning of the pandemic, the mayor said any organization that has a contract with the city is essential and you need to go to work. So they are essential. They don't fall into category 1A. I think the city might be in 1B. I'm not sure. I have started the conversation with DOH about some of our staff. It's a frustration. I feel personally, I feel like I need to be a better lobbyist for especially the shelter workers. I mean, I would think anybody right now, in all fairness, anyone who's working from home in our organization is not part of this conversation. These are the people who are seeing clients every day and interacting with the community. And that's where it is. It just, I need to be a better lobbyist. And, it is frustrating to see that there are people who.
Risa, veterinarians and the whole veterinary community right now is 1B, but there is a subclass of that. They aren't even the regular 1B. So we're still waiting to get in on that. But right now, veterinarians, the whole veterinary staff is not included. So I would assume the shelters would be along with that, if not for the city. But we're 1B, but subdivided out of that.
Yeah, I think the question is
Corinne from
when,
the health department.
Right?
I just want to add, that as Risa said, the front-facing staff, in particular of ACC, are essential workers. But as Risa noted, that's not the prioritization, which is being set by New York State, doesn't include at this point all essential workers, including essential workers from the city health department. So it's really New York State that's setting the eligibility requirements. We're keeping a close eye on it, but it's not. I just want to clarify. It's not that the city health department is excluding ACC, and everyone is following what's happening with vaccine supply. New York City is vaccinating people, as we have supply available 24/7. So we are very much looking forward to being able to vaccinate the front-facing staff at ACNC, as well as as at the health department and other parts of the city, and eventually all New Yorkers.
And yeah, and Corinne and I have started that conversation. I mean, it is a frustration for so many people who are trying to get vaccinated. And as a result, really, we are prioritizing our staff's health and safety. And so when we get challenged about why don't you do more events or let more people in or whatever, we really have to go back, and we go back to the COVID task force. That's why we have a task force, and tell us, you know, they're the ones who are following all the directives and the rules. Jay, with respect to vets, I know that Robin has been following that, and we're keeping our eye on that as well. Okay, so let's turn to the final slide of my presentation, which is really, this is the community and the data. And really the data we're collecting is so much driven by the community. I know, Denise, you were looking for the placement numbers. So let me scroll back. As I look for,
I thought placement this year versus last year in this presentation.
Yeah, so placement last year was 93%. And overall in 2020, it's 92%. For dogs, it was up. For cats, it was down a little. And again, so much of the cats, we're really thankful to groups like Brooklyn Animal Welfare Coalition. They took in so many cats that never came to ACC.
I think it's important to point out when we are saying placement, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Katie, but of the cats that weren't placed, it's because they had a medical condition that required humane euthanasia, or they were an owner requested euthanasia. We are not euthanizing any cats, zero, because we don't have placement. So I know we're down on that number, but it's not because of placement efforts. It's because of the health of an animal coming in.
Are we current, like, because there was a time when the crowding and you know, lack of transport and timing of getting adopted animals out was a huge issue. I'm just wondering, are we a little bit, you know, lighter on that? Is our capacity not 100% full? Are we feeling like, you know, we have a little more room to breathe in that area?
Our population is lower than it was certainly at other times, but we do have a number of dogs that really need to have a double kennel. So whenever that grows and we can't provide that, we start considering that we're kind of over capacity. Even though we have room to take in more animals, it's just the way we prefer to provide them with living space in the shelter.
And what was our euthanasia this year versus last year?
We really are measuring, when you say we're measuring it by the placement rate. Do you want euthanasia numbers?
It's a less than 1% increase.
And let me ask another question. Did any of our animals get COVID?
No.
Okay.
And just to include with euthanasia and more about what Ellen said, that euthanasia really, it was the medical cases that were so bad. I mean, I think what we don't talk about a lot are the animals that come in that are really difficult cases and need humane euthanasia. You know, we have veterinarians who are making those decisions and professionals. These are animals that, you know, it's euthanasia for a humane reason. In terms of animals that are in the shelter, I mean, we're so much further along than we were even 3 years ago in population. The interesting thing about the decline in intake is whether this is if this is sustainable. Is it all COVID related? Can we continue to serve the community with surrender prevention to encourage more people to have a lifetime commitment with their animals? That's really where we want to take that. And if that means that what's left in the shelter are the really difficult behavior cases, certainly we're seeing that with dogs, or that we're a service to the community because it's an end of life service, or it's an injured animal that the police bring in. That's what we will be. That's what we will do. I feel like the amount of community work that we have done during this time has so much potential to change the way the care centers serve the community. And more animals in foster, that, as I said before, that's absolutely the future. And we can use the care centers perhaps for more work on behavior. It sort of brings me to my point about what lessons learned, or when we say a new model of animal welfare, it's about community, it's about collaboration and having those partnerships in place to launch programs when the need arises. And it's also about keeping pets in homes. And that's either through foster, and we've had temporary foster where it's basically helping someone board an animal while they come out of their personal crisis. It's through surrender prevention. It's access to veterinary care. That's a huge issue that's being talked about nationally, and something that Dr. Brennan is focusing on for our Queens Animal Care Center, because as you know, there's going to be a public-facing clinic to that care center. Access to affordable vet care is something that we need to get ahead of. And that's because we see for surrender prevention, medical is a very, very big issue. And then just the wellness of our staff, like that's also part of this model for animal welfare. We have to pay attention to our staff. They really are heroes. They always have been heroes. And they need support, and they need support from the community, and they need in how much the community can do for their pets, and how much we're able to do to go into the community safely. Because again, we feel that this model of how we've been working is going to extend for quite some time until really it's safer to do more community work, the vaccine clinics and all of that. So there's a lot of thinking, but so much of it revolves around collaboration and keeping the pets in homes, and how the shelter can serve really for those really hard cases. And we're really, as difficult as a year as it has been, like I said, the staff has been terrific. The volunteer pool has been terrific. The board support has been great. We really, we're keeping our heads above water. Are we optimistic? I think we're optimistic that there's a lot that can be done in community work to keep advancing animal welfare nationally. And we're optimistic that we are part of that national conversation and have laid a lot of good groundwork to continue serving the community more outside of the care centers than inside. So I think that that's actually a good point for me to just turn to Jen, who is in charge of all of the oversight of our capital projects, and in particular, building the Queens shelter from ground up. And so I'm just going to turn it to Jen for an update on Queens.
Thanks, Risa. So hello, everyone. I am thrilled to present an update on the progress of the Queens Animal Care Center project. As of this week, the foundation is complete. The first floor walls are 90% complete. All the underground plumbing and electrical is complete, and we're on track to open in the summer of 2022. And you can see some just amazing photos. I'm just blown away by how quickly the walls went up. I was on site a few weeks ago and just to walk around and see the walls going up. It's just, it's pretty amazing. And now for an update on the other capital projects, I'll turn it over to Christine Kim, who's the Senior Community Liaison for the Mayor's Office of Animal Welfare Community Affairs Unit.
Thank you, Jen. How's my volume? Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. So good morning. Nice to see you all. Today I'll be giving a brief update on the animal shelter capital projects managed by the city. Next slide, please. As a quick overview, the de Blasio administration has dedicated $115.7 million for animal shelter development and renovation, with the goal of having a full-service animal shelter in every borough in the next few years. So 2 of our existing shelters, one in Staten Island and one in Brooklyn, are getting complete ground-up renovations. Our 3rd existing shelter, the Manhattan Care Center, is getting a brand new adoption facility constructed on the plot of land contiguously just behind the current facility. There are also completely new facilities planned for the Bronx and one already underway in Queens, which Jen just presented about and is being managed by ACC. Unfortunately, due to COVID-19 and the pause on capital projects, 3 out of the 4 projects being managed by the city are still on hold. Next slide, please. However, I'm still able to share some good news about one of those sites. So in October 2020, it was announced that the artwork integrated into the design of the new Brooklyn Animal Care Center is one of the winners of the 38th Annual Awards for Excellence in Design. The 11 projects were selected by the Public Design Commission members from hundreds of submissions. These projects were selected because they exemplify how a foundation in good design can achieve civic projects that serve communities, inspire neighborhood pride, and provide durable and resilient spaces for New Yorkers. The piece is called Colorful Companions and is by the Nigerian-born Brooklyn-based artist Olalekan Jayafus. It's intended to represent the playful relationship between companion animals and their people. It's integrated throughout the exterior and interior, and the artwork is designed to boost the presence of the Brooklyn Animal Care Center and draw visitors into the site. So on the slide, you can see some of the renderings of this piece. Next slide, please. Our Staten Island Care Center is the only one of our capital projects which is not on hold, so construction continues to move along. Currently, we are in phase 2 of construction, which includes the main adoption entrance, the parking lot, and dog run. The photos you see here are construction of the dog run. Next slide, please. So within the next few days, we should be beginning installation of steel for the main adoption entrance and all the facilities around that main entrance. The photos on this slide are of the wall coming off the front of the building, which you'll see a rendering of in a moment, and the concrete slab, which is now complete. That concrete slab photo, that's the floor of the remaining portion of the building. That's to be completed during phase 2. Next slide, please. And here's the rendering of the completed Staten Island Animal Care Center. We project completion for summer of this year, which is right around the corner. And that is the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Christine, hi.
Yes, hi.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Couple of questions. Just really great to see Staten Island getting closer and closer to being finally completed. How does this project differ from the other capital projects that it's still able to be moving forward? Is it due to the extent of the project in terms of being close to completion, or how is this criteria, and what can we do to get our other projects back online?
Yes, well, you're exactly right, Patrick. It was already underway when the pause was put on all of our capital projects, but we had already broken ground at the Staten Island Care Center. So the rest of the projects, for just like all capital projects in general, they're coming back online in phases, and the rest of our capital projects are still in the design phase. So the pause will be lifted, but we just don't have a solid date on that yet.
Okay, thanks. I know that it's beyond any of our control who's on this call today, but thanks for clarifying that. And in terms of what's being lifted right now, are there any signs that anything that's in the design phase is being lifted in terms of the pause?
I can't confirm that for you right now. I know that Department of Health and Department of Design and Construction are all doing their due diligence and submitting all of the projects that are currently on pause for restart. And so all of that paperwork has been submitted, and the Office of Management and Budget is sort of reviewing all of those things. So as soon as
sorry, it's Office of Management and Budget that's making these decisions?
Yes. So the city has a cash flow issue right now, and that's really what's determining the pause.
Okay. Okay, and it's Office of Management and Budget that's making these decisions of what they, okay.
Yes, that's right.
Thanks. That's very clarifying and helpful for all of us who are always interested to know how the government process is working. And I just wanted to also, while we still have you with your live mic, I just wanted to add our thanks on behalf of the board, all the work that you're doing. Risa mentioned all that incredible effort to help people who are in need right now to be able to stay with their animals or get reunited with their animals. And I know you're also working with the leadership you're providing with the Animal Planning Task Force. I know that you're also trying to tackle this big challenge around evictions and keeping everyone safe in their homes and safe in their homes with their animals. So thank you, Christine.
Oh, it's my pleasure to work so closely with ACC on these very important initiatives.
And
Patrick, can you remind people to write their questions?
Yes, I was just about to do that. We're about to move to the public Q&A session, and online here in this virtual gathering space. The way to do it is to pose your questions in the Q&A in the Q&A tab. If you're calling in and you aren't online, you can email us at info@nycacc.org, correct?
Yes.
And I would also add, you can always write to us, and if you are interested in reaching any of the members of the board, all of us, you can address at that info@nycacc.org. You can write to us, and we would get your comments and questions as well. But Katie Hansen is going to provide a reading out of the questions, and we will field the questions in the best possible way that we can. And so we'll now move over to that. Katie, I can't hear you. I'm not sure if other people are having trouble.
Here either.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Victoria, can you make Esther Koslow part of the panel just for her question? Because it's too long to put in the chat box. Esther, will that work for you?
Can anyone hear me?
Esther should be able to speak now.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank all of you for all the hard work. We've never faced anything like this before. So to use the word challenging is understatement, but I have questions about the budget. Has ACC had to reduce the salaries of kennel staff or of any other employees? And it's been reported that the care of the shelter animals has deteriorated some due to low kennel staff numbers and low kennel staff morale. Have you seen that? Because it's been reported that it's happened. I just want to clarify that it's correct that the Department of Health has not reduced the funding it contracted for under its contract with ACC. And has ACC been able to fulfill its commitment to audit the small New Hope groups that might be pulling too many animals and not have a place for that? Those are my questions.
Lisa, do you want to talk about the shelter conditions and the?
I can start. Lisa might be having trouble with her microphone. I'll start actually at the end with the New Hope audits. We do automatic audits on any new partners. There's a timeline that happens. So anyone who is onboarded has an automatic audit. We also do an audit anytime we see a group start to pull either more animals significantly than they ever have, or a type of animal that they haven't pulled before. So if a cat group starts pulling all challenging large dogs, that is something that there's going to be a conversation. In terms of the conditions at the shelter, we've talked about it. We definitely have had staffing challenges, and we have a lot of data on the number of sick hours there have been, which is significantly more this past year, with significantly more sick hours with less staff. So a lot of people out. We have staff working overtime. We have brought volunteers back in to help as much as we can. We are constantly looking at the buildings ourselves, and I'm not sure what the source is that you're referring to. So that would be probably helpful to know, maybe offline, to know how accurate it is. But I would say that, yeah, staff morale has not been as high as it probably has been in the past. And I think that has a lot to do with everyone's morale right now in the world. But also, yes, it's hard to be a staff member working when 5 people on 5 out of 8 of your team have called out sick or have been quarantined. And then I will leave the questions on salary and contract to Risa.
I heard something about washing machines not working at both facilities at different times. Do you know anything about that?
It's more the dryers. We have had some challenges with our dryers, and that's something that we have been working continuously with DOH, Jen Peavy and her team. We have had challenges with the gas for the dryers in Manhattan. So we were able to get 2 donated electric dryers that we're using right now. And we have the work scheduled tentatively to do on the gas line, but we have to turn the heat off to do it, and we can't do that right now. So we're making it work the best we can until we can find a warmer time.
Going back to the first part of Esther's questions, if you reduce staff salaries, when we saw we were in a deficit, we did reduce salaries. The senior leadership team and the leadership team took a salary reduction, which is still in effect. We did not change anybody else's salary. With respect to the DOH budget, yes, you're correct, and I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. The contract amount was the same this year as it was in fiscal 19 and 20. But in those 2 previous years, we received what the city called a one-time enhancement of $3 million, always with the understanding that it was one time and not to get used to it. We had it for 2 years. We were anticipating getting it for a 3rd year, and were told to budget with that in mind. And then having created the budget and started the fiscal year July 1, 2019, 2020, it was, we were then told we were not going to get the enhancement. So the funding amount under the contract remains the same as it was last year and the year prior.
Okay. So I'm going to go right into the questions. We've already addressed the question. There was a question about ACC staff getting the vaccine. We've already addressed that. Amy Grossman has a few questions. What will be done when more people start getting evicted once evictions are back in place and have to bring their pets to shelter? Also, when more people go back to work and they feel they don't have time for pets, is there any way to prevent people from having to give up pets when evictions start?
So these are all good questions that our surrender prevention team and leadership team and the animal planning task force team are all starting to dive into, and using, thankfully, the pause on evictions as the opportunity to spend more time addressing that. But we don't have answers to that right now, but it's obviously a very, very important and an issue that can really change what's happening at the shelters, and also for people who, but for this pandemic, will be in a situation where they can't have their pets, and we feel that that's absolutely something we have to address and help.
She also asked, has there been an increase in animals coming to the shelter because of COVID deaths? And I'm not sure we can track that in particular. And also, does it seem that more dogs are being found abandoned, tied to poles? And we are not finding that. Okay, so.
Wait, hold on. And as far as COVID being a reason for an animal coming in, we did see a lot of that last summer. We have not seen, knock on wood, 5,000 times, we have not seen an increase of that given as any reason for an animal being surrendered lately.
Okay.
I'm sorry, this is Christine. Can I just jump in really quickly about the evictions piece?
Yes.
So the Animal Planning Task Force, which lives under the New York City Emergency Management umbrella, is working on what's called the Pet Owner Eviction Project, and big shout out to Animal Haven for spearheading that. The goal of this project is to really catch cases early where people who are at risk for eviction and have animals can connect with really animal social workers to help them find alternative supports for their animals. Also, the messaging from the Mayor's Office of Animal Welfare has always been, the best way to prevent animal shelter surrenders due to evictions is to stop the evictions. And so we're working very closely with our Office of Civil Justice and our Mayor's Office to protect tenants on the human safety net that is going to prevent evictions. So I just want to give some peace of mind to the people who are worried about the impact of evictions on the animal shelter. We are definitely aware of it, and we are actively working on solutions.
Thank you so much, Christine. Thank you for that. I don't know if everyone can see the questions, but I do want to say Adelia Harrison, who heads up Brooklyn Bridge Animal Welfare Coalition, who we had mentioned takes in a lot of kittens. They had over 1,000 adoptions in 2020 compared to 430 in 2019. And their intake was 810 in 2019 and 1,300 in 2020. So, I mean, without organizations like that, we would all would have a lot more kittens, and really appreciate that. And we're really happy that the ASPCA gave you a big grant. So that's exciting. Okay. Esther, you answered your question. Joanne Romero has a question. Has ACC made a comment on the Post article from Democrat Bob Holding regarding the ACC? Risa, you got this one?
Yes. I spoke to Councilmember Holden to understand his comments in that article. I think that there was clearly a misunderstanding of the facts and the data that ACC has. His concern about animals, he thought that intake was way out of control, and because of COVID, people were bringing in animals, and that our adoptions were way down, and so animals were languishing. And so I referred him, we had a good conversation. I referred him to many of our examples and data points, and opened up the lines of communication so that he will continue to be a partner with us and talk to us first before making comments to the media about something that required a little bit more fact checking. So, and he's a good partner of ours. We have met with him before. We enjoy working with him. We've done some pop-ups with him. He's given us discretionary funding. So again, what I always, and he's come to the care center, and he even acknowledged that. He acknowledged the types of dogs that we have in our care center and said, yeah, some of those I can see have some behavior challenges. Again, what I said to him, which was successful, and I say to any council member is, you know, really before you make a comment, come see us, get to know us, come and look at the environment within which we do our work. And then we could really start from the same place of understanding. And obviously data and facts are, you will gather them when you come to the care center.
And Risa, do you want to address the reason that we don't have mobile adoption events, since that was an issue for him?
Okay, yes. We talked about that. I explained to him that with the requirements of social distancing, the mobile adoption vehicles that we use for mobile adoption events, it's impossible to social distance. We can't put people on that truck. And also the interactions with individuals, you know, people coming up to the truck to see dogs, if we take them out, it's difficult. And again, I said it before, I'm prioritizing the health and safety of our staff, but there's another component, which is finance. With the reduction of the $3 million one-time enhancement, we retired the mobile adoption vehicle for two reasons. One was funding. It takes money to run that, and we were using that additional money for that vehicle. But in addition, in the very beginning, we were not going anywhere, as was anyone else. No one was going there. So the staff on that vehicle were then deployed to do adoptions, virtual adoptions inside the care center. And so with the reduction in staff, either through vacancies or through absences, we really needed more boots on the ground at the care centers. And he understood that. I think doing events is difficult. I know his community has done some events, but again, it really comes down to prioritizing the health and safety of our staff.
Thanks, Risa. Okay, we have a question about fosters. There seems to be an increase in dogs returning from foster homes for bites. Are there measures being put in place to prevent this? For example, better training for fosters, or better matching their experience with dogs, or better evaluating strays, unknown dogs, prior to sending them to foster? That comes from Emily McLaughlin. Ellen, I'll let you get this one.
Sorry, I'm thinking. We've definitely had conversations internally about the fact there have been bites in foster homes. and it's something that we have to talk about between the foster program and behavior and making sure that we're getting accurate information from fosters about their experience level and giving them accurate information about the behavior of a dog that they're taking. We've definitely tried to kind of expand our thinking based on feedback we've received in the past that maybe we were kind of too strict about all the dogs we put into foster. And so now it's a moment to kind of take pause and maybe look at the fact that maybe we shouldn't be putting some of the dogs in foster, unfortunately. I mean, obviously the goal is to have as many dogs as possible, not in the shelter and in foster homes and improving in that way. But at the same time, we don't want to put anyone at risk. So that is definitely something for us to look at more carefully.
Thanks, Ellen. And then just to follow up on that, for another placement question, are there delays in getting adoption appointments or appointments to meet or foster cats? This is from Susan Wolf. She says there's a 68-week delay in getting adoption appointments.
That's the first I've heard of a delay of anything like that length. So I'll have to look at that. You know, I think some of this goes back to the staffing challenges we've had and the interest in adopting and fostering in general. Our adoption email account gets hundreds of emails every single day. And so we are desperately trying to keep up with them. We have brought someone who used to work for us in adoptions back remotely to help with that, and working with volunteer program to train more volunteers to help with adoption inquiries. I'm told that sometimes we have a lag time of 2 weeks. Yeah, I mean, there's right now there's more demand at times than there is supply for certain animals.
Okay, so we have a question about the Brooklyn shelter, I think in response to the article. This is from Bill Sackery. Have any board members, senior ACC management ever made unscheduled visits to the Brooklyn shelter recently? If so, could you kindly describe what has been observed? Are there any initiatives to improve? Thank you. And also we could probably touch on the DOH surprise visits and the comptroller surprise visits.
I was there on Saturday, and I will say that all my visits to the care centers are surprise because I don't physically work in the care center. And for anybody, those are difficult facilities. You heard there was a question, and Ellen responded about the condition of them. The facilities are old. We know this. That's why there are so many capital projects lined up. We are always trying to patch up where we can to just get us through. I was there when one of the dryers caught fire. I mean, there's a lot. Walking through just reminds you of the challenges under which our staff are working. And during COVID also, you know, I want to get a read to see how is the community supporting our efforts to manage safety. And so, you know, I'm not really sure, Bill, what specifically, but yes, I think many of us, I know Ellen recently was in Manhattan. We do that, and we do surprise because we'd also just a touch base just to see what's going on. And each visit is always a little different. But on Saturday, it was busy, staff were engaged. I think, you know, in COVID, the big challenge, and I think for most organizations that are very staff intensive for serving clients and their, for us, the animals, we have a lot of absences. As you know, if you are exposed to someone, you don't have to have COVID to be out of work. You can get exposed and you need to be quarantined for a good amount of time. And we're very strict about that because we do not want our staff to get sick. So that is a challenge that this is another area we're going to spend a lot of time figuring out staffing and how to keep moving.
Okay. Reese, is that it?
That's it for me. I think that I think I answered the question. If there's more, Bill, just put it in the comments.
Okay. Why is it that many times a rescue is interested in an animal and they are euthanized anyway? You euthanize dogs in particular due to medical or for behavioral concerns. Some dogs posted have neither. Why are they euthanized? I can say that's not true, but Ellen, I'll let you take this one.
So I'm sorry, can you read the beginning of that again to me? I just want to make sure I'm hearing it clearly.
Why is it many times a rescue is interested in an animal and they are euthanized anyway?
We sometimes get inquiries on animals, and when we follow up, because we do follow up on every placement, the people who have inquired have no understanding of the dog's behavior and no plan for the dog. And those are times we do not place the dog. We do not euthanize any animals if they don't have a behavior or medical concern, ever. That has not happened in a long time. I mean, I think years. I don't even remember the last time, especially not a cat and even a dog. I don't think we've euthanized a dog just because there wasn't placement in several years. But we do not, I mean, almost for exactly the reason that we were just questioned about foster placements, we're not going to put a dog or a person in an unsafe situation. And some of the dogs that we get have come in having really hurt people. I mean, we have a dog right now who sent 3 people to the hospital. I am not in good conscience going to send that dog to someone who can't handle that behavior. We have a dog right now that we're desperately working to find placement for, who has destroyed cages in the care center, destroyed kennels, was sent back by the one partner we sent him to, 8 paintings off the wall at a foster we sent him to. He needs a very specific placement. So there's not a cookie cutter answer about how we do the placements. It's very individualized for the safety of the animal and the people. I hope that answers it.
Thank you. Thank you. It's always best to check with us if you want statistics that are based on real data. There's someone else has a question following up on Esther's question. Is there a process to request a review of New Hope Partners? New York Bully Crew and Rescue Dogs, Rescue Soldiers, for example, are known to have kennels, which I believe is against ACC rules for New Hope Partners, specifically outdoor kennels or indoor kennels with poor conditions.
I'm not really going to speak directly about another group when I don't have that information in front of me. I think I would really need more information to answer that question, to be honest. I don't know what the complaint about one of the groups would be, having had multiple staff members go there. And they do have indoor, outdoor kennels, plenty of space for the animals. So I think whoever asked the question, if you want to email me directly, we can chat about that.
Thanks, Ellen. Joanne Romero has a follow-up question. Is there a way to bring low-cost vets to other smaller rescue groups? One of my biggest challenges while I managed a small nonprofit rescue in 2020 was the vet exams, neuter surgeries, and resources. We would have been able to help rescue more kittens if we had that. This is a good question for Dr. Brennan. Robin, are you there?
I am. Hi. Good afternoon. It's a really good question. Right now, I think the challenge that we're all having currently is the slow return to spay neuter in this community and nationally in general. And then I do also think, and maybe Dr. Coleman can weigh in as well, veterinarians right now are experiencing the same situations that we are, with shortages of doctors, shortages of support staff, and then also trying to manage and navigate a clinic with COVID protocols in place makes it much more difficult to keep up with the number of appointments that there is a demand for. It is something that I think our partners and colleagues at the ASPCA are addressing as far as low-cost services and coming on board with some of their planned clinics later on in this year. And then we do have intentions of having our Queens Clinic address some low-cost and access to care issues for communities, not necessarily for rescue groups. But right now there's a vet desert. We're all struggling. We're all have too many clients and too few people working. And I think this is a topic that we're discussing nationally. It has to do with vet shortages in specific areas, decreased veterinary students in school. It's a problem that's going to take a complex and collaborative solution between a lot of people.
Yeah, right now I'm still dealing. I have 2 people with possible exposure, quarantined for 14 days. But I don't think I've worked during this whole pandemic. I've had it.
Sorry.
Because of short staff. So anyway, lucky nobody's gotten sick, but we do have people. I have 3 people out today because of safety measures. So anyway, no easy answer. It's difficult, short staff. One other minor thing, there's a change in veterinary medicine to become corporate medicine. A lot of doing it more for profit rather than for caring of animals. So we're seeing a whole change in the landscape of the veterinary business. You'll see names and new projects. They're all corporate, so they are not much involved with costs. But right now, we're still navigating until the vaccine comes and everybody can be protected. We're still navigating the hazards everyone else is.
Thanks so much. Marilyn Galfin would like to address the board. I'm going to ask that she be put on as a panelist just for her question part. Is that possible? And let me know when that's done.
Sorry, so I won't make it a panelist. I'll just unmute the person. Can you just give me their name again?
Marilyn Galfin. It would be.
Okay, I see a Marilyn G who is now unmuted.
All right, do you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. I have tried to reach out and made an attempt to reach out to some of you with comments and concerns in the past and had not received a reply, which is very frustrating because, you know, there's things of concern that I wanted to be addressed and some comments. One of them was addressed today, which was actually a really nice thing to hear about you stopping the contract for the headquarters, stopping that lease, which would give hundreds of thousands of dollars needed for the animals. The other thing that was also mentioned of concern was we're seeing again that some animals are going to fosters some incident is happening and then they're coming back with bites. Some of them are going to DOH holes and have no chance of being saved. My suggestion was, is there a follow-up with the fosters, really keeping on top of fosters? We don't know if these incidents are because they're not following protocols of decompression. We don't know there's concerns of, which has been not addressed in trying to have a conversation about the concern of maybe overdosing animals on trazodone, and maybe some of these animals are going through withdrawal, and some of those concerns. So can there be, number one, a follow-up with these fosters to really keep on them, and as well as I suggested before, which I think you are doing, if there is a concern that they can have real-time intervention with a behaviorist. So if they're able to identify any behavior that's of concern, they don't wait. That's one thing. The other thing is, I think there needs to be another concern is that we're not seeing all the animals that come into the shelter are being made visible. And the case in point was Diesel. I'm sure you all know about Diesel, that the behavior team was claiming this dog was unadoptable, dangerous, and so on. Through it, and we didn't know the dog was there. Through a reliable source did we find out that dog existed. Through a sequence of events, we were able to get the dog another day, and thankfully a rescue pulled it. I don't know if you've seen this dog. This dog is very sweet. And as soon as the dog got there, it was already licking, and the rescue person and the training is coming along. So that is a concern that some of the animals, we understand concerns for behavior dogs, but in my opinion, a lot of these dogs are not getting a fair chance. We've seen another member of the public come in when there was a dog that ACC said was lunging, growling, you couldn't get near it. Yet we see a member of the public, an untrained person coming in. The dog was responding to food, and the gentleman says, sit, the dog is sitting. What I would like to see as a possible thing to happen, if there's animals in there that you are deeming a certain way or dangerous, whatever, that a third-party experts are brought in to make an evaluation before an animal is destroyed. The other thing I wanted
Marilyn,
to...
you've got your 2 minutes are up. I just wanted to see you to wrap it up.
Here's the thing, Katie. I want to have these discussions, and I've reached out to many of you to go further into it because there are a lot of concerns that I believe can be addressed that can make for better outcomes and for fair chances for every animal coming in there. So I would love the opportunity, and if you can let me know who I could speak to and how to make that happen, I would really appreciate that, because there are many more things that need to be addressed that I think are very doable, very reasonable, which will have, I think, a better outcome and give increased chances for the animals, the big dogs, the behavior dogs, and so on, of getting out of the shelter. And then includes mediation with rescues. And I know I have to get off, but please let me know how I can continue. But one major concern I would like to get in now is I believe there needs to be a third-party mediator addressing conflicts between rescues and ACC. I have people even contacting me about personal vendettas, all kinds of allegations. Someone I know right now, Katie, that wants to rescue, and because of what I believe is a very simple, if something can be resolved, we have somebody who wants to pull. And
okay, Marilyn,
yes.
I think we actually have addressed that with you. If you have a name of a partner that would like to pull from us, please have them contact us.
Right, but who do I contact that I can continue some of these concerns that I would like to see have a conversation with?
Marilyn, have you been to the shelter and met some of the dogs that you seem to be under the impression have behaviors we're not describing accurately?
Well, I'm hearing this directly from rescues themselves.
No, but I'm asking if you have seen that. Because I saw Diesel. I'm telling you, I met Diesel, and based on what we saw, based on the intake, the Diesel tried to bite multiple people. Based on what I saw, the multiple times that I saw that dog myself, I know that the partner is still struggling with him, and he was, in a word, terrifying.
Right.
His behavior in the kennel was terrifying.
Well, this is why I want to go into discussion, because have you seen the dog is out of the shelter now? And we've seen dogs that were deemed were very problematic and they come out and it's a whole different story. So this is a further conversation, and I would just appreciate if we can have that conversation. And how do I make that happen?
We can have that conversation as long as you're open to listening to.
Oh, sure. I definitely am, and I would like to present, other sides as well. So
Okay. I think it would be good for us to have that, and I will have that conversation with you. I just ask that you understand we are not lying when we describe the behavior as we.
No, I'm not stating that at all. But
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
I do want to have dialogue because there's more things that I believe will be helpful in saving more lives, which is the goal of everyone involved. And I do want to, so that's the conversation I would love to have.
Okay, yeah, and let's set that up because I think that is such a long conversation. It's too long to address everything here. And there's so many sides to it. I mean, even just the side of, yes, we've tried to send more dogs to foster, trying to do that more. And then we've had more bites. So, everything is so linked to each other when we try to find placement. So I think having a side conversation would be very helpful, and I will set that up with you.
Marilyn, thanks for asking to speak up. It was really helpful, and I think I'm dialogue going forward. We're running quite a bit over schedule, and I think there might be one question.
Yep, there's just one last question, and I definitely want to make sure that it's public because people have been confused about this in the past. Are fosters only allowed for the New York City area, or can they be fostered outside of the 5 boroughs? Ellen?
We do allow some animals to be fostered outside of the 5 boroughs. We just have to make sure that if anything happens, going back again to the conversation we just had about bites, that there is a way that we can quickly get that animal. Because our field team does not go outside of the 5 boroughs for the contract.
And we have fostered outside the 5 boroughs. That was the last question. So I think that's it. I think we're done.
I'm doing meeting. Am I muted?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you all. Thank you, board members. Thank you, ACC staff. Thank you, everyone from community and who did the meeting today. Again, thank you for the questions and for the comments. And I know that all of us do share the mission of working to provide the best possible for the homeless and for which we gathered today and challenging. And it's great to know that there is this wider community of support and engaged citizens and people and volunteers, community leaders, politicians, members of the press, people who are all trying to together to improve the conditions and the care for our animals. So thank you all. We do have a couple of matters that are board only matters to discuss. So I would like to have a motion to move to executive session. The meeting, board members who have an invitation to the executive session, and I would like to suggest we convene in about 10 minutes at 12:10 to give everyone a chance to have a quick break. I don't expect the meeting to go very schedules in the afternoon, but I think probably 5 minutes tops would be my guess. So
Motion.
Of motions. And a second.
David. Motion.
Second.
So this concludes our meeting. And again, thank you all. And we'll see you all in person in June, but next year is a safer bet. Bye.
Great. Thank you. Ellen, there's another, and Jay, there's another